First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you guys for spending the time. I mean, it's pretty nice outside. I'd be having drinks and being next to the pool if I wasn't sitting up here. But this is our 50-year facility plan, a roadmap to leaving our legacy for generations. I'm in my final stage of public education, at least at the level I'm at. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with you. Our goal is to not only share this with you, but offer our expertise if there's questions and thoughts that you have down the road that we might be able to help you out with. This is really something that we've worked together hard on, and I hope by the end of this it gives you guys some ideas, because who in the hell would ever think about a 50-year plan, much less a 5 or 10-year plan when it comes to facilities.
So we have this QR code for you, and we encourage you to grab that with your phone. Through it, you can find examples of all of our work. We're really sharing just about everything we've done, everything we've thought to share with you that you can look at. I think it's always helpful to look at what other districts are doing for examples, and so we invite you to do that. We're going to have the QR code up again at the end, but just wanted to let you know that that's there.
So I'm Terry Davis. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Littleton Public Schools. I've got over 35 years of experience in capital construction and K12 construction, 29 of it in Littleton Public Schools and 6 of it in construction.
My name is Diane Leiker. I'm the Chief Communications Officer for Littleton Public Schools, where I've been for the last 20 years. And then I also spent some time as a Director of Communications in a school district in Kansas prior to coming to Colorado.
And I'm the newcomer, Jonathan Levesque. I've been with the district for 13 years, working my way up through the financial department, and before that was an auditor.
So why we're excited to be here, there's many districts with the same challenges that we face every day, and everyone is now starting to see, well, not everyone, but the majority of us are seeing declining enrollment. How can we work with each other to preserve our schools and keep students in our districts? Pride and ownership is big when it comes to your families. Anybody who has ever done a demographic study and tried to change boundaries know how important our schools are to our community, and it's even becoming even more important as we go on. Knock on wood, Littleton Public Schools has passed every single bond and mill levy that we've ever gone for. And we believe with this 50-year plan, we will show you the success and how we got there because of how we put these bonds together. We also want to share that, again, that if we can help out in any way, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And I'll have some business cards and hope to meet everybody later this evening.
So before we get started, we'd kind of like to know who's in the room. So we're just going to do a few quick questions. And just by a show of hands, do we have any school districts here that have, let's say, enrollment of less than 20,000? Oh, okay. Several. Less than 10,000? Okay, so many of you are the same size as we are. How many of you have school districts greater than 20,000? So a lot more. Okay, very good. How many of you have districts that are in declining enrollment? Quite a few of you. How many of you have schools that are older than 60 years old? Yep, right? And how many of you feel that those facilities are no longer meeting your students' needs? Yep. How many of you have asked your community to pass a bond election to replace those schools in the last 5 years, but it failed? Nice. Oh, there's a couple, okay. And how many of you will try again or try for a bond in the next 5 years? Okay, all right. Thank you. So we're going to tell you just a little bit about us before we move forward, just to kind of set the context. We're a preschool through grade 12 school district. We serve about 14,000 students, and that includes 2 K-8 charter schools. We're in a suburb of Denver. We're about 10 miles straight south of Denver. We have been in a state of declining enrollment for 20 years. I've never worked in LPS where we weren't declining in enrollment. I don't know if I brought it with me. That's a good question. We serve an aging community. We're landlocked, so there's no opportunity for growth in our community. We have closed schools We've consolidated schools. We've changed about every school boundary in our entire district, and now we're building new facilities for the first time in 40 years. So that's really exciting for all of us. In the past 20 years, we have passed 6 local elections, 3 mill levy and 3 bond. And we believe that the keys to that are constant and consistent communication. We involve our community in everything we do, and so we're going to give you some examples of how we do that moving forward.
And some of the reasons that our declining enrollment are because of the cost of living in Colorado. I think the median price of a house in our district is $650,000. And when you look at Arapahoe County that we sit in, the numbers are roughly around $75,000 if you want to be able, you have to make $75,000 as a single income to be able to support yourself and live in that community. So we're seeing a lot of those younger families just saying, we can't afford it. We can't come up with a down payment for the houses that are in those neighborhoods. So today's goals are to really gather the right data, improve the community members that we work with, discover, do you really know who your taxpayers are? And when we go around and we talk to other school districts, especially the smaller ones, a lot of times when they do their surveys at the end of their bond, they find out, why didn't you pass? Well, we didn't have the right information. We didn't have enough information. Did you really get out to the right people? In our case, 70% of our community members do not have children in our schools. The nice part about that is it's a largely part because they're retired, and retirees understand the value of a high-efficiency school system and what those new buildings look like towards the younger generations, and it helps keep their tax bases up. We're finding a lot of these districts are still struggling to get that communication out, and when we talk to them, they don't really have a robust communication plan. They don't have an operational side of the house that can really drive that home of why this is important. And if you ever sit in a class and you watch a child, the way they interact and the way they work in these old classrooms that are 65 years old or 60, 70 years old, they'll tell you that the 650 square foot classrooms are no longer large enough to really do what they want. They don't want to sit in a row and be educated. They want the larger 900 to 1,000 foot classrooms with the breakout spaces that are out there. And how many of your buildings are fully ADA compliant? And let's face it, anymore, there is no such thing as grandfather clause. You're not going to get grandfathered in because somebody says you need to make it ADA compliant. And I would tell you right now, there's absolutely no way you can make your buildings ADA compliant the way they were built prior to 1998. So why a 50-year plan? I had a committee member that was on my long-range planning committee back in 2012 that had retired after he sold his tech company. He was very financially savvy. And he asked me, he says, Terry, when are we going to stop throwing good money after bad? We were going for roughly an almost $90 million bond in 2012. He says, when do we stop throwing good money after bad and start looking at a 50-year plan? And I thought he was crazy at first. So I dove back down and I started, researching around the country and seeing some of the larger districts back east or in the Midwest that with their bonding capacity, if they start building a percentage of buildings right now, by the time they actually finish all of their building new schools, they would have already had to start replacing the ones that they would do today. And it really became apparent that we do not want to fall that far behind to where we let our children down, let our communities down. If a school, how many of you guys, your school district's your largest company in your community? I think we all pretty much are. How do we let our taxpayers down? I live in my community. I have to think about my neighbor as being my employer. So when we started the deal, that person ended up being on the Board of Education a couple of years later. He started having the communications with my superintendent, with other board members, and then started making it public in the board meetings how important this was. We came back and we came to a conclusion that we can actually do a 50-year plan as long as you've got the people to support it, you got the boards to support it, and the community to support it moving forward. So our goal is to go every 10 years. Our last one, we're right in the middle of the 4th year of the first phase. We've actually replaced a middle school. We've done 3 elementaries. We have purchased an old auto dealership, which we're converting 2 of the buildings into a STEM program. That's our first phase. We were blessed enough when we sold the bond. We went for a $298 million bond, and because of our reinvesting that money, we were able to get another $60 million out of it to be able to build an additional building. So 3 years out, We want to make sure that this is the whole 50-year facility plan assessment. 3 years out, you want to gather and analyze, prepare reports, review bond debt, refundings, determine the tax need and the cost of the taxpayers. 2 years out, you want to look at a demographic study. Do you guys do demographic studies regularly? I mean, it's getting to be now when you're seeing declining enrollments and enrollments going up and down. If you don't do a demographic study every 2-3 years, you really don't know where you're at. But our demographic study is always the first thing that we do moving forward with a new bond. That gives the board the opportunity to truly see where the kids are coming from. Then we charge a citizens committee to vet, validate, and gather community feedback. We really enlist our community to do this. This is not a school district. There's 2 individuals from the school district that run it, but the rest of it's committee members, and I'll talk a little bit further when we get down the road. Then 12 to 3 months out, you conduct a community survey, test the ballot language and the tolerance. Do you guys all do that to see what a community will support and what they won't? We have a district south of us that went out and they got a 37% voter approval rating for a bond and mill levy they were going for. And I told them, I said, I would go back and talk to your board and tell them, let's not go. Because there's nothing embarrassing more when you see those numbers and you go out and then you fail them. They still went out and did it and they failed it. And Diane will talk a little bit more about that later on. Then you've got to get your board to vote to place it on the ballot. And then you also have to be very creative about the language that you put into that ballot. You don't want the details so tight that if something happens, which we all know something happens within a 5-year bond, that you need to shift money around. So you need to write it to where it's a little bit looser. And when I say that, it's like talking about HVAC. Don't identify equipment. Identify HVAC needs by building. That allows you, if another piece of equipment goes down during that you don't have the funding for, you can limp the one that you wanted to replace along, you can shift it around. That's one of the big reasons that we're so successful. We still satisfy the ballot language at the end because of that.
So the funding in Colorado is a little unique. Colorado does not directly fund capital improvements, so it has to come from your general fund if you wanted to save up and do a building. But what we do is use general obligation bonds and mill levies. So that is the main source of our revenue for building improvements. This is a sample of ballot language that we use. We also have unique tax laws in Colorado. We have the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, or TABOR, that really specifies how we have to put the language in. And so we use our bond counsel to make sure that we are to the T on our ballot language. So it states the cost that we're required, or we're asking for, and then the needs. So this is just some really detailed ballot language that we have up there.
Go ahead, next one. So 3 years out, this is the piece that's the most important to starting your next bond. We do a capital needs assessment. I'm in the middle of a bond right now. We actually went a year longer because of COVID and procurement issues. We typically do them in 5 years. But with this capital needs assessment, we're just conducting one and completing it right now. It's in the final stages for review. It'll come to me in the next couple of weeks. I will take it to the Board of Education. This is in order to get us to the next bond, which we plan on running in either in 27 or 28. This is what we call our shiny book. It's basically a two-page report on every one of your facilities. This will give the Board of Education, the community, a full understanding, or at least a 50,000-foot level understanding of what you have with your infrastructures, your underground, your walls, your roofs, your electrical, plumbing, mechanical, the whole 9 yards. The other thing that we do too is that we're creating a priority list of buildings for replacement. I'm actually having an architect, an engineer, and a contractor come in and take a look. Once they decide which buildings that should be replaced in 2028, they're going to take a look at the high school that we know needs to be replaced and the next 2 that after that, and how are they going to stage it. So we can already start having the conversation with our Board of Education and start planning. Do we have to move kids out of those buildings? Are we going to try to build while those kids are in the buildings? So we're already starting to plan for the 2028 bond, even though we haven't passed it. We don't want to get ahead of the Board of Education, but it gives us the time to really do the due diligence that needs to happen to be able to pass this thing. Here's just some information for you. This is what we give to our Board of Education as an average age of our schools, just to kind of sell it. So it's just for your information. We don't need to go too deep into that. This here is when we put this together, is we truly looked at as a replacement of a building every 3 years. Well, nobody goes to a bond every 3 years, so you're looking at 3 or 4 every 9 years to 10 years for us. And that will show you that even if we go every 10 years and do 3 buildings, we're still going to stay the average year of 62. So by the time this 50-year plan is done, we will then start looking at 5 or 10 years down the road of starting to replace the buildings we do right now. But it keeps us ahead of the curve. So conducting a demographic study goes hands in hands with those buildings and the capital needs assessment. We take a look at the birth rates, new development, student growth or declining, neighborhood turnover, and school capacity. That's getting tougher and tougher right now to do because you just don't know what those kids, and there's no guarantee those kids are going to come to your schools. In Colorado, we have a policy that if you have space in those buildings, kids can open and enroll from within the district or without of the district. Only when we're at capacity are we allowed to shut those down. Then we also take a look at a transportation study. Do you guys do transportation studies often? That when you want to talk about dividing your community up and having to find different routes home at night because they want to figure out where you live. But for years, we always just filled kids and bused them to the buildings that we wanted to fill. We're no longer doing that. We're putting them in the buildings that are within their catchments. And we're also a district right now that is, with the declining enrollment, we closed 3 elementaries last year while we're building more robust elementaries. Our elementaries are 4 rounds. Because of the funding in the state of Colorado, we feel that that's the most cost-effective way to be able to give the children the things they need, like special ed, full science, full gym teachers, gifted and talented, I might have said that already, but to give them the specials they need and be able to fund it properly without having to dip into the general fund to fund it, that's our best model is 3 and 4 rounds. Any 2-round schools, we have to fund from the general fund, and it doesn't become a real value to the parents and the kids of the community.
So while Terry's office is starting to look at the actual construction, we're in the finance office looking at the investments and the debt. So we're continually looking at refunding opportunities with our investment bankers. That is the best way to talk to your community about refunding and saving them dollars. So then when you come ask for it again, you can remind them that you've already saved those dollars in refunding. We also like to, in the finance office, we are fully clear, transparent, and try to communicate as frequently as possible through multiple board meetings, workshops. We also work with the communications office quite a bit, giving them details and facts to put out in their newsletters. But then we also like to drill down into give them their dollar per $100,000 cost when we're looking at mills or bond, because then that really hits home to how much it's going to cost our taxpayers, and then they can realize that it is worth getting a new school or 2 out of a new bond.
Okay, and so we'll talk a little bit about the communication strategies we use at this point. As you all know, it's critical that you all tell your story every single day, because if you don't tell it, somebody else will, and you probably won't like the story they tell. And so we spend a lot of time with messaging and telling our story. And the important story about 3 years out from an election is to make sure people understand your financial situation as a school district. We spend a lot of time talking about the lack of funding we have, what we're doing with local taxpayer dollars, how we're doing a really good job with what we have, but imagine how much more we could do if we had more funding. And so you'll notice what we have here in this blue box really sold it for us early on. Our Board of Education president said this from the dais: Colorado's lack of funding for K12 education has denied an entire generation of LPS students the education they deserve. I have far more faith in the community to figure this out than I do the Colorado legislature. So we were blessed to have a board president that said that from the dais. That was something that we could use. Feel free to give your board members talking points before they talk about budget from the dais if they don't do that now, because it will pay off for you later. But this gets the conversation going. And so, we talked a lot about funding in our district. 3 years out, we tied it into everything.
So now we're at 2 years out. We're starting to present the demographic study, which is really laying the groundwork of why we need to do this and where we can focus our energy. We also want to start talking to those investment bankers and the financial advisory committees and the board again to tell our story. You know, the committees in your districts can really help advocate for you. We use our financial advisory committee. I'll go visit the district accountability committee with the story, and then they can start spreading it among the community as well. And so that groundswell starts from those connected families or those parents down to the school level and on and so forth. And then look at every opportunity. Make sure you've exhausted all opportunities of funding and explain why things aren't working, why your budget is where it is, why you can't use general fund dollars, and you need to go out and ask for those additional dollars.
So 2 years out, I asked the Board of Education to charge a citizen long-range planning committee. And their role really is to take a look at everything that goes on with the bond. We also do something that's a little bit different. Like I said earlier, we have 16 members that are on this committee. It's myself, it's my director of operations, and then it's parents, it's architects, engineers, it's the senior citizens that are out there. They're a huge part to gathering the data and talking to the community. Then you also have your community groups, your advisory committees that are meeting monthly in the district that are part. So we hit somebody up from each one of our committees, but these are not district employees. Again, these are community members. And again, it's going back to what Diane's talked about on the communication. It's building trust. If you do not have trust from your community, whether it's from the board to your operations side, your communication side, your finance side, you'll never get anything past. Our communication is so robust and so often that it's really just about building that trust from your community so they will support you long term.
So a few things to keep in mind. Your needs will always be greater than your tax tolerance, right? You can't go out and ask for everything at once. Obviously, this is a 50-year plan. So just make sure that you're biting off as much as you can chew at that time. But then another thing to keep in mind is premium. Bond premium is very important, and have a plan for it. In Colorado, we are allowed to go for premium. So before we finalized everything, we went to our board president and our superintendent and said, what would you like to do? We came up with a plan, and they just said, go for what the market will allow. And that actually got us an additional elementary school. We got premium of $6 million on a $300 million ask. So that bought us a brand new elementary school that was the next on the list, which kind of helped push everything forward on the 50-year plan. But have a plan of premium before you go. Some states don't allow it. Some districts might just reduce their initial ask once the premium comes in. But have the plan before you go in. And then use that plan in your communication strategy. So once you have the authorization, make sure that that's part of it so everybody understands what premium is and how it's being used, that they're getting more for those dollars.
John, can I add something to that? Mm-hmm. What was important to us, the reason that John and we all went to the board president and the superintendent to have those discussions, as soon as the district finds that you have money, you're going to have every high school saying, I need it, it's greater than any other high school. You're going to have every middle school and elementary hitting you up for that money. It's better to have that plan put together at the high level so that you can actually have those conversations without being pressured, and having your board to back it helps you get the things that you need, because you're truly looking at it from a district level, not, again, like we talked this morning, are we a school district or a district of schools?
Okay, so at this point in our communication, again, we've been talking about the funding challenges that we had for, over the past year. We've been folding that into all of our communications. And so about 2 years out, this is where we start talking about the legacy that we want to leave for our community. And we had a superintendent that had a lot of vision, about what he saw for the future of our facilities and what we could do better for our kids of all ages in our district. And so we started using that kind of language. And so in the blue box is pretty much our talking point that we used for the next year. Littleton Public Schools is at a crucial point in its history. The legacy left by past generations has been well cared for, but with current funding levels, it is aging beyond the district's ability to maintain the level of excellence LPS students and community members expect and deserve. And it was important for us to tie, because of our aging population, right? 70% don't have kids in our school anymore. It was important for us to tie the legacy left by past generations to the possible legacy we could leave for future generations, to honor what was done for us in the past, and now what can we do moving forward for the next generation of kids. Okay, now it gets really serious. So about 8 months out is when we do our community survey, and we hire a firm to do the polling for us so that it has a statistic reliability. And so we use our community survey for lots of different things. We use it to educate our likely voters on our issues. We use it to measure tolerance for a tax increase. We'll ask the question, a draft of the question, a couple of different ways. You know, will you back 250 million? Will you back 300 million? Just to see what the difference is. We'll identify what issues are more important to our voters than others. What will they support more than others? And then we'll test our actual likely ballot language. And so that's when we really want to involve bond counsel in those conversations to get that draft language put together so that we can get as realistic of a test as we possibly can. And you know, the one thing that we have kind of followed in LPS is if we take our community survey out and it comes back to us with a 60% more favorability on a survey, we'll feel pretty confident about moving forward, because in our experience for us, we usually lose about 10 percentage points from survey to actual ballot passage. And so if we're not up above the 60% range, we're pretty nervous and we're not sure if we're going to move forward. And so at this point, you know, we've done our survey, and you can read through these if you want to sometime, but these were the messages that resonated the highest with our community. And so we used those messages moving forward in our presentations, anytime we were talking about the possibility of having a bond on the ballot. And then one of the things that we chose to do, and it was really effective for us, we asked our superintendent to basically what we call go out on the road. And so we developed what we called a road show. Basically, it was a presentation for him. And he went out and talked to every community group we could think of, you know, your Rotary, your Lions Club, your Optimist Club, the Chamber, every school staff, every school PTO. Now, in a district our size, you can do that. It's exhausting, but you can do it. If you're coming from a really big school district, you probably have to be creative in how you do that. But he really became the face and the voice of the vision for the district and also the possibility of passing a bond. And so he listened very closely. He took a lot of feedback. He would change his presentation based on what he was hearing. He would gather questions and he would get back to people with answers.
4 to 6 months out, Long Range Planning has completed their search to hear the community, to find out what their beliefs are, and now they're ready to present to the Board of Education. They'll make the recommendation to the board to have it placed on the November ballot. 2 things that they're going to make, or 3 things that they're going to make a recommendation. Do we go for a no tax rate increase? Or they may come back, and in a lot of cases anymore, you can't just keep going for the same money because you don't get ahead. In most cases nowadays, it's going to be a tax increase. And they also recommend the number that they believe, based on the surveys that we did, that we could successfully run for. Then we asked the board to stand up a citizen bond oversight committee. This is something that we've been very successful throughout our bonds. The Citizen Bond Oversight Committee is a committee that after the bond has been passed, they will meet once a month. They will go over all of the financials. They will take a look at the projects that have been, you know, where we're at in the projects, and then 3 times a year they update the Board of Education. Full transparency, buying trust from the community. So it doesn't stop once the bond passes. We continue to educate the community often.
So 3 months out, we're finalizing our ballot language with our bond council, getting all those, finalizing the verbiage of what we want to support in our bond language. And then we're going to the board and actually getting the final approval, the approval by the board to go on the November ballot. Also, just a reminder, as you're going for an election, if your county runs them for you, if you run them for yourself, just bring those people along as well. Don't forget them, because there's a lot of deadlines and things, especially for elections, as you can imagine.
Okay, and so remember how I mentioned that, before we would have our superintendent go out on the road and do this long road show, about 40 different presentations that he gave during that time. So once the board votes to place the bond question on the ballot, we had him do it again. And so this time, his roadshow was more about the realities and the specifics of what was a vision before, making that vision a reality through the bond election. And so he got very specific about what exactly were we going to do with the money, what kind of schools, which ones would they replace, which school communities were we going to combine together, which schools were we going to close, what kinds of furniture, what might those buildings look like. We had a lot of visuals of other new builds that we had seen that we thought were great. Lots of specifics. We wanted to make sure that we talked a lot about how all of the money would be spent, and we wanted to make sure that everybody could see something in it for themselves. So every school was mentioned and what they were getting. We didn't focus on just the new builds or the new programming. We talked about that, but we also talked about every new turf field. All the high schools and middle schools were getting new turf fields. The junior stadium, all the high schools and middle schools were going to benefit from that. Every classroom is getting new furniture. We wanted to make sure that everybody could see something in it for themselves. And so some things to remember about this point in time is, we always consider, okay, when do we think voters are more prone to vote for a bond, passage of a bond, right? In our community, it tends to work well for us in a presidential year. It might be different where in your community, but that seems to work for us. We also take into account, is this a year where we're going to have a Board of Education election? Because all of our elections in Colorado have to be in November. They all kind of get lumped together. I know it's different in other states, so you also consider that. What time of year do you want to run? And also, there are things that your community can be doing in the meantime before the board chooses to put a bond on the ballot. We have a citizens committee that's working behind the scenes. They're very up to speed on what's going on. They're very supportive of putting something on the ballot. They will actually come and speak to the Board of Education throughout the summer to say, hey, we really support this idea. We hope that you put the question on the ballot. And in the meantime, we want you to know that we are gathering a small army who will support this if you choose to move forward. We're already raising money. And so we found that gives our Board of Education more confidence in moving forward, because they also don't want to put a question on the ballot that they don't think will get passed. And so it just gives them a little bit more confidence. And at the end of the day, the question that you have to ask yourself is, do you have the trust of your community to go forth for a bond? And I will tell you that having our superintendent go out twice in such close proximity to each other really changed things for us. And I'm confident that doing that is what helped pass the election for us. So it's really important. It's what did it for us.
So who in here, since we're mostly larger districts, do you guys manage your bond in-house? When you pass your bonds, do you have the teams does any of the larger districts go out to private companies that are owner's rep for you? So do you guys keep them on in between bonds as well, or do you hire them just for the bonds while they're managed? I'd like to know if there's who keeps them on in between bonds, if you wouldn't mind raising your hands. Use capital dollars to support that during the off years. And who of you in the room actually just hire them for the bond process and then they step away at the end? And that works out pretty good for you guys? So with us being a medium to smaller size district, it really makes sense for us to bring in an owner's rep. And a lot of smaller districts will say, why would you, we don't have the money for it. I'd say you can't not do it. That'd be the biggest mistake you'd make. I have a district that's east of us that called me up and said, we're thinking about managing ours. They're a little bit bigger than us, but not much, and they do not have people on staff. But they thought they could do it with their own staff. And I said, well, that's great. If I was your superintendent or your COO, I'd say, go ahead and do it. At the end of the bond, I would go ahead and terminate you. And he said, why would you say that? I said, because if you've got that much time to manage a bond when you do not have bond program managers already on site, you have way too many staff members throughout the lean years that you don't need them to maintain your buildings. So when I look at it, it's a fee. And I'll tell you what, this is my fourth successful bond, and we've had a company come in and work with us on each and every one of them. And if they're a good bond company, their goal is to save you. Their fee's based on a percentage. I think it's like 2.4, 2.5% of the overall bond if they're a reputable company. But what their job is to try to find 2 to 4 times of savings in those hidden contingencies. And if they're good about it, these contractors have a lot of hidden contingency in their contracts. We had one that was basically a $79 million middle school, and we had one person that focused on them for a week and went through their contracts at the SDs, and they found $2.2 million in hidden contingencies. And if I'm a homeowner and I'm doing it at my house and they come back to me in the last hour after they finished everything and, hey, we saved you $30,000, $40,000, we're giving it back, I'm great, I'm happy about that. But in a district, if they come back at the end and they say, we've got $4 or $5 million that we were able to find or save through the process, well, I'm already too far down the road with other projects that I could use that $4 million. That $4 million is now going to cost me $6 or $7 million because I've got to bring in a new contractor and reset up, and I didn't get to tie it into a package. So it's very important for us to make sure that we have that owner's rep on board. The other thing that the owner's rep does that I don't know if everybody's that solid on their contracts. You know, when you look at general contractors coming in, they want to use their own contract. The architects and engineers want to use their own contracts. We have our own. We make sure that they're tight and we adjust them every time depending on the year we're going out, depending on what's changed, what's new. It protects us. And they see that from the very beginning. They're at the program design. They're help guiding us. I had a district come to me and say, hey, we want to use our contractors. We want to use the contractor that's been with us for years, and we want to put them on 4 different projects. I said, what happens when the electrical industry dries up in town, or you run a problem, so you're pulling electricians off of one building to put them in another building, the 2 separate contracts, and now none of it's getting done on time or efficiently. So they do a lot of that stuff for us. The other thing is that they have not only your state level of understanding the procurement issues, things that are going on in your state, but they've also got regional and global. I mean, right now we're all being hit because of the hurricane. Try finding a portable right now. Try to find concrete, PVC, things like that. There's things that go on around the world that really affect us, and we've really got a 5-year time period. They give us a lot of things to think about up front that we wouldn't normally think about on a day-to-day basis because we're looking at local economies, what's going on in our state. And there's so much of that that's affecting us globally right now.
And so we're kind of at the end here, but this is a quote from our superintendent after we passed our most recent bond in 2018. And we felt that our plan just really did come together. And so we're hoping that it works out for us again in 2028 and beyond. And then here at the back of our presentation, we have a ton of examples. So thank you for grabbing the QR codes, but we've basically given you everything that we did. This presentation is also available on our district website. I'm just gonna quickly there we go, to the QR code. We have a few minutes left if anybody has any questions or comments.
And I'll say one quick thing. Our Board of Education has priorities that they put in place, their values, and this is number 3 on their value. So as long as we can continue them transitioning from one board to another board, and they keep the value up there, this will be ongoing for the next 40 years.
Yep, let me just bring in the microphone.
Thank you. Hey, thank you so much for sharing this information, very helpful. Just curious from a financing standpoint, Do you encounter the concept or the issue around arbitrage? And if so, have you dealt with it or how do you deal with it?
Well, it hasn't been too much of an issue lately with the interest rates, but it's always something you have to look at and be ready for. But lately, it hasn't been an issue.
Well, and we looked at the potential cost savings because of the pandemic, procurement, lack of labor forces. We felt by extending it another year may cost us, and even rising costs in materials. But we felt that giving that year a little bit of a break and not failing because we pushed too hard, the reward was better than the risk of it.
But yeah, you just always have to look out for that measure. Yeah.
No, I think we had a question over there.
Hi, Mike Pickens, National Council on School Facilities. You're very organized in what you do. I mean, you have it down to the month and everything. My question is, when you go to the voters, are they approving the 50-year plan, or are they approving what's in the 50-year plan? Is there a process there that you have a 50-year master plan that needs to be approved before you go to the voters? I'm a little fuzzy with that.
So we bring it to the Board of Education. Like I said, it's one of their top 3 agendas. And so it's communicated that we have a 50-year plan. But what the voters are going for is whatever we have in that ballot language at the time. So if you look at it, it's 1/5 of your district technically. And so we actually list that. If we're looking at a building replacement, they know what buildings we're replacing, except with what we did with that extra building that came on at the end because of the money that we were able to obtain. So they're voting on specific things in that ballot language.
So they're really, the voters are passing phase 1, if you would,
Right.
of the 10-year plan or the 50-year plan. And so while we communicate about the long-term vision, they're really just approving the first chunk of it. And then that's why we have to go back again in 10 years and then hopefully pass that one.
They're approving the plan as well as what's in it, but they only approve the first 10 years.
I guess, yeah, they're seeing the vision. They're not really, because a bond is only as good as that bond. There's no guarantee we're going to pass another bond. But I can tell you, when you look at these buildings and what the feedback that we get from the community is second to none. I mean, all you have to do is watch the children, the way they react in these new buildings. I sat outside in a pair of shorts and in a polo first day the first elementary opened up. And there was parents that said, we're not changing. These mom and dads were walking by with their children, watching what the kids were doing and saying and acting, and the mothers and fathers saying, why in the hell would somebody not want to come to this beautiful school? The things that we offer there, the things that they didn't get in those old hospital-looking buildings that were built in the 40s and 50s. And unless you're a historical building, we have one historical building, our administration building. They're all built that box and mortar type, brick and mortar type looking buildings. They're not really, but you'll still have parents or grandparents standing outside them as they come down crying and being upset about it and frustrated, but they see what it does for their grandkids. Yes, sir.
So in your 50-year plan, different systems have different life expectancies. Do you have like a refresh for buildings,
We do. In each one of the bonds, we have X amount of dollars that's set aside for those type of things. So it's not just replacement. Typically in the past, what I look at is for a district our size, once we get up around $50 million worth of capital needs in our capital needs bank, let's say, then we know we're supposed to be going for a bond. I started this back in 2007. It's an Excel spreadsheet. We meet with all of our stakeholders. We meet with all of our principals. We meet with all of with learning services, transportation, security, nutritional services to find out what their needs. We start usually at the end of September and we meet all the way through November. My director and assistant director do that. And then they have a matrix that they go down and they narrow it down to, it's usually health and safety. We only get $1.5 million each year to put towards capital needs. That's how they fund those. And so that bank just keeps, so that need continues to grow. And we get around 50 million, we know where we're at. But as you get older, we're going to start at the end of this bond, we're already going to have $50 million in needs moving forward, and we won't go for 3 years after this.
We have time for one more quick question here.
Did I answer that? Thank you.
Yeah, again, extremely well organized and communicated, and really great. My question is related to that 50-year plan. I don't know how many of you still planning and working at the school district in 50 years. So my question is, how do you plan on institutionalizing this, your vision, the process, everything you just described, so that way your replacements, et cetera, can execute it in a way that's respectful to the original vision?
The three of us live this. And we make sure that our superintendent's on board, which he is very much on board. We're going to have to educate another superintendent in a year from now because he's unfortunately retiring. But your Board of Education, you know, you don't have everybody stepping off the board at the same time, so you've got that rollover. And I'm hoping to maybe come back and work on the side a little bit once this is all said and done to help educate my school district. But this is leaving my legacy. I mean, because I won't be here in 50 years. God, I hope I'm not doing this in 50 years.
And we're using this as the roadmap, right? That's why we're laying this out, and to indoctrinate essentially our replacements to continue it down.
And we're hoping that our new facilities speak for themselves, that you know, as we have the next generation going through these buildings over the next few years, when it's time then to pass the next one, that the schools that are up next say, yes, we want what they have. And so we need to pass this one, and then, you know, just keep moving forward, that hopefully the way that we're rolling this out is so successful that our community will continue to want to support this moving forward.
This is the fourth time we've presented, I think, on this subject to different types of CASBO, ASBO, CASE, all the different organizations we can get out in front of. We really believe that this is something we can help everybody with, and we can learn things from you as well. And I'll be around all night tonight, so I would love to chat with anybody. And we all will be, so if you've got further questions, we'd love to hear from you. And if you've got ideas on how we can improve ourselves, we'd sure be happy to hear that too.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing this.